When the Japanese captured our position and took us as prisoners, I thought they'd kill me. Apparently, I'm really lucky because they're sending us to their prison facility in Heilongjiang.
My boyfriend is always so sweet when I'm throwing up. Even though he says I look disgusting as he hands me the toothbrush, he reminds me that I'll be beautiful once I've lost all that weight.
There's nothing in there worth dying for, the fireman said, holding me back as I screamed and cried. My 12-year-old cat died cowering by the window, wondering why I didn't come to save him.
I held my crying son over the cliff, praying my arms wouldn't give out as I watched the other weeping parents let go of their children one by one. The soldiers with the guns sit behind us and keep laughing as they repeat, "The one who lasts the longest gets to keep their brat."
The cure for the disease would take a century to synthesize, so the sick were sent 100 years in the future in the hopes that they might be cured. After a century had passed since the first person was sent and all of humanity gathered to reunite with long-lost family members, millions of charred carcasses began flowing in.
The CDC has just released the 4 scariest words mankind has ever heard. Rabies has gone airborne.
Every time I tried to leave my boyfriend, he told me he'd kill himself, so I stayed. When I finally worked up the courage to break up and leave him, I realized he wasn't lying, but also that he wasn't going out alone. My 2-month-old baby wouldn't stop crying for a full 24 hours, no matter what I did to calm him. In my exhaustion, I held him tighter and tighter, desperate for him to just stop. And when he finally did, I felt a wave of relief as I laid him back in his crib.
I'll let you in on a little secret.
The anesthetist whispered while putting the mask over my mouth and nose, and I found myself getting numb before my brain surgery.
This doesn't stop the pain. It just paralyzes you and keeps the experience from entering your long-term memory.
My wife and I used to think it was funny when our black cat would chase after a small shadow figure, we called Ghost Kitty, down the hall at night. Ever since our cat passed away, the small shadow figure has disappeared, but now I'm starting to see a human-sized shadow walking toward my cubicle at work every day, while I'm on the other side of the room. "What smells so good?" asked my father, his voice making Mom instinctively flinch as she tended the simmering pot. "You're just desserts," she whispered, a smile beaming across her bruised face as she doused him in boiling sugar. People thought that a .22 caliber pistol wouldn't be enough to save me from a bear attack. But with one well-placed shot to my wife's knee, I was able to jog away no problem.
"Hello, I know this is awkward, but you're my biological mother through my parents' in vitro fertilization." I stared in shock at the young woman who looked so strikingly like me, because I don't remember ever having been an egg donor.
"Daddy, I had a nightmare," I hear my son say, prompting me to carry him tenderly back to his bed. "Oh dear, you've lost another finger," I sigh, before gently laying the body I've cradled every night back in the bed, where he'd passed years earlier. I chuckled as I read the latest question of the day. If you were to die based on your username, how would you go out? My laughter subsided as blinding radiance consumed my vision, and my body was reduced to ashes.
"The death card just means change," I assured my client as I read his future. It wasn't until I drew the Tower and the 10 of Swords that I understood how violently this man was going to die.
Usually I'm not this quick to tell people I can see the dead, but in your case I urgently need to make an exception. Because the dead can see you.
After having 10 miscarriages, I offered the demon my soul in exchange for carrying a baby to term. I sat in my hospital bed and cried as I placed my baby's tiny, motionless fingers against my cheek.
Her father opened up her skin, dripping in the diseased cow blood. The pox might be deadly. However, the soldiers of the invading army would certainly do far worse if she was healthy. The little girl giggled.
Guess who?
As she jumped up on her father's shoulders and held his eyes.
Ew, Dad's face is all wet and squishy.
She complains as the shotgun falls off the edge of the armchair. I heard my girlfriend say,
I should plant some endangered plants over here.
And that's when I knew I would never be rescued, nor my body be ever found. When they issued me only 3 days' worth of food, I thought maybe I'd not be coming home from the war. When they showed me into the private room with a specimen cup and a selection of Playboy magazines, I was certain.
I found a secret room in the basement of my new house, containing piles of bones and an old TV, still turned on and displaying a large number 19. As the door slammed behind me and locked, the number changed to 20.
The year is 2028 and the police have arrested a man trying to break into your home. After you and the intruder's wealthy parents submit the receipts for your legal fees to the judge, it's declared that you caused the intruder emotional distress and you're sentenced to 20 years in prison. Captain, requesting permission to abort the mission as we have a sick time traveler here in the year 1918, said the captain. Permission denied.
Football didn't come home this year, but my husband did, reeking of alcohol and rage, his eyes promising a strike I couldn't escape.
Whenever I considered killing myself to escape my parents' abuse, I'd just recite my mantra, "You don't deserve to die." Ironically, now that they are old, hungry, covered in bed sores, and begging to be put out of their misery, I still have the same mantra.
After sex, I always feel guilty. It's difficult to continue the autopsy afterwards. I have to remind myself that I'm the only veterinarian in the city.
When I was a child, I played doctor with the neighborhood girls. Victor Frankenstein was a doctor, right?
I wish for curly hair, I told the genie, knowing it was the type of my crush. Give it a few weeks, the genie said, leaving me with just some crooked mole on my leg and the feeling that the guy selling the lamp scammed me of my pocket money. All the doctors would tell me was that my husband never existed. But I know what I saw the night he vanished, a needle in the officer's hand.
So you both lied and neither of you were the real parents.
King Solomon sighed and shook his head as his guards cleaned up the mess.
Hundreds of millions took the suicide pills rather than face the killer asteroid heading for Earth. The scientists who knew it would miss were all dedicated to population reduction and never broke their vow of silence.
Catching my wife with another man in the guest room, I emptied an entire clip into them before settling on the couch to think. When my wife called later to remind me that her twin sister and her boyfriend were staying for a few days, the gravity of what I'd done began to sink in.
I used to get picked on by my classmates for having the lame power of causing small temporary lapses in memory. They don't dare anymore, after one of them forgot he had a frenum piercing before an MRI.
People keep telling me not to listen to the voices. I would, but the voices keep telling me not to listen to the people.
They say that losing a sense heightens your remaining ones. Now, with your nose blocked, your eardrums bursted, your eyes and tongue removed, the pain you'll feel should be exquisite. The torturer tapped out in Morse code on his victim's skin.
Daddy, please don't let them take me.
My daughter screamed and cried out as her mother's new boyfriend forcefully dragged her out of my house. She had won full custody over her.
I thought the worst part of being lost at sea would be starving to death as our teeth fell out. But as my husband's old scars started opening up, I remembered that our son had been born by cesarean section.
And for my final wish, I want every nuclear weapon to stop existing. As the genie snaps his fingers, I begin to hear explosions and feel the heat disintegrating my skin.
I must admit, lucid dreaming really is as amazing as people say. But after 2 years, I'd like to wake up again. I stood on top of the cliff, staring at the sun, overwhelmed by its beauty. I couldn't avert my gaze. My vision slowly blurred as my eyes were clawed out by crows.
My mom said I have the same sickness that she had. She says it's the worst thing that ever happened to her, and it lasts 9 months. After the procedure my husband made me get, I felt more free than before. No silly emotions to get in the way. I wanted him to feel this way too, but I don't remember how the procedure went. So I put the ice pick to his temple and swung the hammer down.
My family can remember their past lives, so one day I told my son I was a girl who was murdered. He grinned and said, "What are the odds we'd meet again?"
I knew to figure out which of the 2 people standing in my home was my real mom. I had to ask them a question only my real mom could answer. Both of them smiled and chuckled when they saw my face after realizing they both answered wrong.
I barked violently and bayed at the intruder. "Son, what did you do to Goldie?" the father said. At first, I was delighted to receive a retina transplant to restore my sight. But with some of the things I've been seeing, I'm starting to understand why the donor killed himself. Using time travel, he'd finally managed to make it back moments before his family was killed. It was his 7th trip, and killing them still felt great.
I just caught my daughter playing with herself again. Why do I have to tell her so many times? We doppelgangers need to be cautious and keep the originals locked up and hidden. Otherwise, our secret will get out. Sobbing frantically, I picked myself up from the bloodied floor and ran to push the masked man off my husband, while sirens rang louder and louder. "Please, I'm begging you, sir. Run and save yourself before his friends get here." I was having dinner with my father and his new wife when he suddenly went to the other room. His wife looked at me dead in the eyes and quietly said, "I have no idea who that man is."
My pregnant wife was craving, so I told her to meet me at McDonald's. Every other place has those UV lights in the bathroom that makes it harder to find our veins.
He grabbed my ass as he passionately kissed my inner thighs, inching his way up my body. I watched in silent horror from across the room as he unbuttoned his pants and flipped my lower half over.
"The mushrooms he ate killed him," said the coroner. "This species may not be toxic, but it thrives in conditions similar to those found in a person's digestive tract. It's been years since we have discovered that almost every thought creates a new alternative universe. But recently, we have been noticing, for lack of a better term, lags and even freezes. In some places, if you shine a flashlight into grass at night, you'll see thousands of little lights, each one the eyes of various spiders and insects. It turns out that stars are pretty much the same thing. My parents said children have the biggest hearts. I was disappointed when I found out the hearts are quite small. The second I saw that little boy's picture, I knew he was my son. With happy tears running down my face and the realization my search is finally over, I clicked buy now. As a firefighter, I don't know what is worse. Coming across your daughter's body at the site of a drunk driving accident or seeing your wife in the other car dying in the lap of another man.
One day on this planet is 10 years on Earth, said the ship's AI. I was programmed to inform you of this upon completion of your 12-day mission on the planet's surface. He cried when he saw the acceptance letter from Stanford, as he wished his parents could be here to see it. But he had to do it to come up with that orphan teenager story for the college application.
The witness said he had a wife and 8 kids, the detective said softly. But as he stared at the tiny limbs stacked in the murdered guy's freezer, he realized exactly what he'd misunderstood. Jeannie, I wish there was enough food on this earth that no one ever had to go hungry. Granted, he replied with a laugh, but nothing changed.
Then why do you drink it? The kid asked after I told him that alcohol was poison. Because there is something inside of me that I need to kill, I replied.
On my 21st birthday, I opened up a fortune cookie that just read, "You are dreaming." Ever since, I have seen that phrase everywhere I go, on road signs, billboards, food packaging, post, graffiti. Daddy, why is Mommy always so mean to me? My son asks, his tear-stained face wrought with sadness and fear. Deciding that it's finally time to tell him the truth, I say, she's just upset that you survived childbirth and she didn't. My toddler is quite the handful, often hiding my things around the house and trying to eat small objects. As I heard screaming while I waited outside the MRI scan room, I realized why I was missing change at the vending machine. I torture people on a regular basis, driving metal tools into their body, seeing their blood flow from the wounds and watching their horrified expressions as they sit there helplessly. I simply love being a dentist. Don't you love it when the sheets come out the dryer nice and warm? Yeah, I say, adjusting my white hood as I finish tying my first noose for the night. Who wouldn't want to be comfy on a cold night like this? You should be grateful. A few years ago, your wife would have already been dead from the cancer. I could only mouth her an apology for failing to kill her as security escorted me away.
Your delivery guy has not delivered my food, and he's lying that he's handed it over to my dad even though I'm home alone.
Thank you for confirming your status, ma'am,
he said, and I heard a window break downstairs.
They're harvesting organs! Help! My grandmother screamed into the phone before hanging up. After hanging up, Granny D told her caretakers, "He's young, doesn't drink or smoke, runs daily and is on his way."
It's very difficult to fall asleep when you're 8 months pregnant, especially when your unborn child keeps whispering to let him out.
Wikipedia keeps recommending you read the page for deaths in 2024. Now you're wondering who put you on the list. After confronting my wife about a crumpled motel receipt in our trash, she tearfully confessed to cheating on me because of the long hours I put in at the FBI. The next day, the very first image we analyzed was of a trafficked girl at that same motel, gripping the hand of a woman who wore the exact ring I had just taken off my hand that morning. Paul had forgotten his swimsuit, so he willingly accepted a white Speedo borrowed from the party to avoid missing out on the fun. As he swam, he began to notice thin white strands dissolving on the surface. The man told his doctor that the urine test had to be wrong, and obviously he couldn't be pregnant. Then he saw the ultrasound. Our parents thought naming their daughters after Greek mythology was cute and fun, until Echo could only repeat words and Cassandra started to predict the future. I thought the worst part of being named Medusa would be the snakes, but I'd never been told what happened to Medusa before the snakes. When you have sudden notions to, for example, swerve into oncoming traffic, they call those intrusive thoughts. As my wife gave me the cold shoulder and our son screamed in the back seat, I wondered if there was a special term for when it became a decision. "You are not the first person to make this mistake," sighed the doctor. "But as a dentist, my field is teeth, not stomach." "No, I came to the right place," I said, lifting my shirt to expose large fangs growing out of my stomach. I tried to be supportive when my son changed their name and began using they pronouns. Whenever I ask them about it, they only answer, "We are legion, and we are many."
My mother screamed at me to kill the man leaving through the window, whom she believed to be a burglar, so I shot. It was only then I realized I hadn't seen my boyfriend sneak out yet. I left my 4-year-old alone with Mother, and when I came back, she was covered in bruises, and no one would tell me what happened. Then, while checking CCTV after Mother left, I felt a sudden blow to the back of my head, and my daughter shouted, "Don't tell Mom."
When they arrived on Earth, half the population was rendered blind and the other half deaf. It's unknown who were the lucky ones, the blind because they didn't have to see what the things look like, or the deaf because they couldn't hear the message they brought with them.
As an adult, I've always kept my imaginary friends a secret to avoid embarrassment. When the waitress asked if we were all sitting together, I started questioning everything.
I stare in puzzlement as my wife of 10 years suddenly yells clear in a strange voice. The breakfast table and our 2 beautiful daughters fade away, and I wake up in a bustling emergency room, unknown people hunched over me.
As she fell headfirst down, she looked almost calm, as if accepting her fate. Many others would soon follow her, as it was much better than the inevitable.
"I swear there's a baby in there," screamed the woman as she stood in the middle of the barn. Her blood and guts spilled around her as she clawed out her insides.
The president authorized the nuclear strike at 4:14 a.m., just 17 minutes after watching American diplomats slaughtered by Chinese commandos. The warheads had already incinerated Beijing, Shanghai, and Moscow before his aide noticed the diplomats' shirts subtly shifting color, a telltale sign of deepfake manipulation.
"Sir, I'm pleased to report that after an additional search we found the 12th child alive and well, hiding in a washing machine. Thank goodness the father was able to confirm having a dozen kids before passing out from the smoke inhalation. Otherwise we'd have given up after finding 11, and this burning bakery would have been the scene of a tragic loss." Ever since my dog was a puppy, we loved playing hide and seek. He would always find me with a simple call, "Here, boy," no matter where I was. But now, trapped at the bottom of this well, hungry and desperate, I kinda regret teaching him that game.
I remember always banging on the door of my bedroom when my father locked me there for time out, saying I was unfixable. The memory now seems so real as I attempt to kick open my casket, my father claiming he found a way.
My little girl asked me for a toy that can never break. I said to her, "Instead of that, why don't you try raising one?" My wife fell in love with someone else, and when I found out, she ran away with her, believing I couldn't put an end to it. I warned her not to get too attached if it wasn't a boy, so I don't know why there was so much drama when I found them.
My boyfriend has always sworn that he will never leave me for another woman. But this, I think as I stir the antifreeze into his soup, is the only way I'm going to be 100% sure.
I found a man lying on the road who couldn't breathe, so I stabbed him in the heart and took his stuff. I just hope there is someone left to do the same for me when my lungs finally succumb to this toxic atmosphere that we live in. I've been stuck in this broken elevator for only a few hours, but I've already given up pleading for help. No one could hear me over the screaming outside, and I'm more worried about the viscous, rusty sludge oozing through the elevator doors. A few years ago, I discovered that I was receiving text messages from my future self. Today, the message read, "Do not go home tonight."
Standing alone and forgotten on the surface of the moon, the astronaut tried not to panic. But when she felt the shaking and gravity changing around her, she realized the moon was bringing her back home.
The old man sat among the bodies of the monsters who attacked his house, trembling and gripping his gun. As a new wave approached, he got up to get more ammo and slipped on the candy spilled across his porch. I assumed the cute guy I hooked up with at the party was joking when he told me he was an alien. But the joke was on me, because a pregnancy, let alone one that has lasted 19 months so far, is not something I ever expected to have to deal with as a gay man. My new neighbor seemed like a total creep and utter weirdo. Turns out he's a pretty chill and normal guy after I crawled into the partition wall of our apartments and observed him for a day.
Number 16, the loudspeaker boomed. As I glanced down at my ticket, number 8765309, I began to suspect the devil may have been messing with me when he said I could plead my case to St. Peter.
Your hands are freezing. Here, let me warm them, my boyfriend said, cupping my hands in his before breathing on them. Sitting trapped above the darkness in the ski lift, I didn't have the heart to tell him I lost feeling in my hands hours ago. As I got on my hands and knees to look under the bed, I saw a man in a ski mask and holding a knife. I told him to move over as I heard my father coming up the stairs saying, "Tommy, I need to talk to you about your grades in school." My room is right by the kitchen, so I hear everything that goes on around it. Tonight I heard the clinking of plates and someone counting 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. After the Christian rapture happened to everyone's considerable shock, those left behind and those born to them after all had a strange, unremovable marking appear on their foreheads. It took decades to translate, but the result was horrifying. Do not harvest, not fit for consumption.
Don't open the door unless you hear one slow and then 2 quick knocks, my father had warned, as he left the house to gather supplies. Now at 12 midnight, I can hear the same pattern of knocks, resounding menacingly from every door and window of my home.